Okay, so I'm Camille. I'm a broadcast journalism major here, so I chose to look into freedom of press and speech in South Africa. I'm going to start off with Article 19 on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and it states, "Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and any ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers." So this is all basic human rights, so these are inalienable. Every single person has them. If you remember the video that we watched, I believe one of the first few weeks in class, they were interviewing people saying, like, what do you think is a human right? And a lot of people were having trouble thinking of what a human right was, and those were Americans who couldn't think of like what a basic human right might be. And unfortunately, the freedom to speak is often taken away from people, and this results in the oppression of people, for example, apartheid. So I have white minority is in control. This is during apartheid. The white minority was in control of South Africa, and to them, the blacks and the coloreds basically meant nothing. They oppressed them. They didn't want to hear what they had to say at all. At the time, they had the Internal Security Act, and the act stated that the apartheid government had broad powers to ban or restrict organizations, publications, public gatherings, and to detain people without trial. And there's evidence of all of these things throughout apartheid. Oliver Tambo, throughout apartheid, was a main voice for the blacks, and ironically enough, he was out of the country the entire time, so it was hard to broadcast a specific message because it was hard to get their message out there. A main thing for them, and you'll remember from Have You Heard from Johannesburg, was the radio broadcast that Oliver Tambo was able to make. The main point in that, you might remember, was his Make South Africa Ungovernable. And it was such a big deal for him to be able to get that broadcast time, to get on air, and to be able to get their message across. Fast forward, goodbye apartheid, hello new constitution. We're now into 1994. Mandela is in power, and the new constitution says, "All shall enjoy human rights, which guarantees the freedom of speech, worship, and association, and unfettered freedom of movement." Now Mandela's view on free press. There was a big speech that Mandela actually made, and I'm just going to read you an excerpt of what he said, and the first two sentences are right here. "A critical, independent, and investigative press is the lifeblood of any democracy. The press must be free from state interference. It must have the economic strength to stand up to the blandishments of government officials. It is only such a free press that can temper the appetite of any government to amass the power at the expense of the citizen. The African National Congress has nothing to fear from criticism. I can promise you we will not wilt under close scrutiny. It is our considered view that such criticism can only help us to grow by calling attention to our actions and omissions which do not measure up to our people's expectations and the democratic values to which we subscribe." If you listen to that speech, you'd automatically assume that they had no issue with criticism. They welcomed all types of journalism. You can write anything you want about the government. Ironically enough, Mandela was not actually a huge fan of the free press. June 1997, Mandela actually met with members of the South African National Editors Forum, and people who were there described it as a tense standoff, and according to excerpts from the Rhodes Journalism Review, Mandela charged that the black journalists weren't writing freely. They were only writing bad things about the ANC because they felt the need to impress their white editors. And also, when a bad article would come out about the ANC would write back defending themselves, and Mandela felt that those responses were suppressed by the editors. The man standing next to him is Thabo Mbeki, who was president after Mandela, and unfortunately he held the same views as on free press. Before becoming president, he accused the press of harboring a tendency to look for crises, faults, and mistakes. And if you were to watch the news here in the United States, basically all of it is about faults and mistakes that are happening in our government or in our communities today. So it's funny that he would say that, because I feel like that describes a lot of the U.S. media. He actually started an online newsletter called the ANC Today. That was started in 2001, and I said bias at its best, because it is literally a newsletter run by the government to defend themselves and to put out propaganda for themselves. I was looking at it, and The most recent article has, well, it has a lot of articles in it, and this is the title of one of them. Not time to remove the ANC government. As you know, when we're going to be in South Africa, the election will have, I believe, just happened. And this was about 1 to 2 page article explaining how great the ANC is, everything that they're doing for the country, all the things that they have left to do for the country, and why they cannot be removed from power. The next article was called Helen Zille in Perpetuation of White Domination. Helen Zille was the mayor of Cape Town from 2006 to 2009. She's a white female, and she's actually leader of the Democratic Alliance, which is another political party in South Africa. It was a very rude article to read. It basically just attacked her the entire time, talked about how basically she wanted to bring apartheid back to South Africa. It was just a very rude article. And this is just a screenshot of what the ANC today looks like if you were to go look it up online. And then the next is the Freedom House website, which for the Freedom House, if you've ever been on it before, it measures the freedom across all countries, the countries as a whole, their freedom, and then also goes into whether their freedom of speech and press. In South Africa, on the website, is considered only partly free when it comes to press. And I consider it ironic that they're only partly free, because if you go back to the speech that Mandela had made, he says that he wants to welcome all criticism and that they're not going to wilt under scrutiny. Also, in their constitutions, they have a freedom of speech, so why is it that their press is only partly free? This is just no to secrecy. There's a lot of protests that go on about their freedom of speech and press. In 2011, there was controversy over the Protection of State of Information Bill. Basically, what was going to happen is journalists were going to be sent to jail for 25 years for publishing classified information. The argument over the bill was that if it was going to be put in act, it would basically criminalize all investigative reporting. Without investigative reporting, most corruption that happens in businesses and government wouldn't be able to be reported anymore. So it would give the government a nice hiding spot almost to do whatever they wanted, and no one would be snooping around to see what was happening. The next president was Jacob Zuma, and he's still their current president. He's on his second term now. Ironically, I'm saying that word a lot, but he sent the bill back to the African National Congress in 2013, and it's still there now. But Jacob Zuma, even though it seems as if by sending the bill back he was for freedom of press, he has sued the press 15 separate times, whether it was for cartoons such as this or just newspaper articles about himself. Before he was even elected president, fun fact, he was actually investigated for rape. Now looking into South Africa today, all large daily newspapers are owned by the 4 largest media firms, which could lead to pro-corporate bias. In addition, the South African Broadcasting Corporation is a public broadcaster, but it is largely funded by the ANC. If you think of our news stations here today, none of them are funded by the government, so they don't have a bias towards the government. Each one may have a different bias to it, but you'll be able to find a news station that you want to watch that has different views. Also, according to media reports, the South African Broadcasting Corporation has blacklisted certain commentators and analysts who were critical of the government. And again, if you think of our news, every single news outlet out there is critical of our government. And that's about it. Yeah.
Questions?
First,
Yes.
How is print journalism still alive in South Africa?
When I looked at it today, it depends, because most of their print journalism is in English, and there was about 45 different English newspapers. There was, I believe, 4 in Afrikaans, and then there was 2 in one of the other languages and 1 in Xhosa. I don't know if I'm saying that properly. So in total, there's still a lot of newspapers, which I found surprising, because if it's dying here and they have even less freedom of press over there, I found it surprising that they still have a solid amount of newspapers and like decent circulation among the newspapers.
What are you most interested to look at when you go there?
Well, when I was trying to do a lot of research, it was hard to find footage of a newscast because I'm broadcast journalism, and here, any time you turn on the TV, there's going to be news on constantly. So I thought it was funny that I couldn't find much newscasts going on there. So I want to see if I'll be able to get the chance to be in front of a TV and be able to turn it on and watch a newscast in South Africa. Also, it'll be interesting because, like, in Christina's presentation, she talks about like police brutality and whatnot. Like, a lot of our news is about things happening, like criminal activities happening. So it'll be interesting to see what they consider news, because a lot of criminal activity goes unnoticed, or it's just not as important as we might make it seem.
Other questions?